So this video takes you through how you can go about writing body paragraphs in your analytical essay in response to the film Red Dog. So first of all, just as we did with introductions, we're going to go through what the different components of your body paragraph are, what the ingredients are, what you should be putting in. So the first and most important part of your body paragraphs is just like in our writing on The Secret Garden, it should start with a claim, not a statement of fact, but a claim. It should explain that secondary claim in detail. It should provide evidence to support the claim, and of course that evidence should come in the form of chocolate chips to make a beautiful chocolate chip biscuit. And it should link your evidence and your ideas back to your secondary claim and thus your overall claim. And that connecting back to your claim and to your overall claim should take place fairly consistently throughout the body paragraph and should also take place in the final sentence of the paragraph very explicitly to clearly link it back to your secondary claim and that secondary claim back to the overall claim or your contention. Now remember, you have done this before. You did this when you wrote your paragraphs on The Secret Garden, so you are fairly adept at this already. So just the same as in our introduction example, we're going to use the same ingredients as we did earlier. So our essay topic is still, how does the film Red Dog show us that belonging matters? And our contention is still, through the story of Red Dog and the plight of the residents of Dampier, Chris Stenders shows that feeling connectedness to, love for, and unity with those around you is vital to living a fulfilling life. For this video, we're going to be working on the body paragraph that would accompany the second claim, that the transformation of Jocko from an isolated, depressed character to one who occupies a position of leadership in the town demonstrates that feeling cared for provides the stimulus for personal growth. So just the same as in the introduction video, I'm going to take you through the full body paragraph, and then we're going to look at each of those parts. So try not to be overwhelmed. I'll read it start to finish, and then I'll break it down, and that will hopefully help you to see how you can go about replicating those own parts within your own writing and see that it's actually much, much easier than it looks. The transformation of Jocko from an isolated, depressed character to one who occupies a position of leadership in the town demonstrates that feeling cared for provides the stimulus for personal growth. Jocko's initial depression and isolation within the town of Dampier is evident in his revelations that he doesn't have a home and that he hasn't laughed in years. Depressed after the loss of his family, Jocko implies that he feels no sense of connection to the town when he shares that he is there only for the money. In this way, he alienates himself and gains a reputation as someone who never even chuckles. Stenders emphasises Jocko's isolation and depression through the scene in which we see Jocko seated alone at the local bar on the morning that he chooses to take his own life. Shadowy lighting and mournful music highlight the depths of Jocko's loneliness, and as he departs from the bar, a lingering close-up shot of a photo of the wife and child who he feels he killed, conveys that whilst Jocko felt a sense of family and belonging at an earlier point in his life, his connectedness is not to the town of Dampier. Conversely, at the point at which Red Dog saves Jocko's life, as he floats in the bay, Stenders employs the use of a point-of-view shot of the mining community rallied on the shore, the bright, warm colours of the miners' costumes in the beach scene in stark contrast to the sombre colours of the prior scene. This moment is the critical turning point for Jocko, at which he realises that he is cared for by the people around him. It is as a consequence of this newfound sense of inclusion, demonstrated particularly by his close friendship with Peto, John and Vano, that Jocko develops into a leader of the community. This is evident in the fact that it is Jocko who, in the culminating scenes of the film, persuades the community to finally take charge of itself and erect a meaningful statue that represents the Pilbara in the community members. Ultimately, despite his harrowing past, it is through his slow development of connections to the townspeople of Dampier that Jocko is able to overcome his depression, taking his place at the forefront of the community as a leader within it. So that body paragraph seems pretty long and meaty, but once we actually start to break it down, hopefully you'll see how you can go about doing something similar in your own paragraph. So first of all, I already have highlighted on the scene our claim. It clearly makes a claim. It clearly connects back to our overall contention and thus the essay prompt. But what you might not have noticed is that there's actually sort of a few littler claims within that claim. And so what we do when we write a body paragraph is we just set about proving each of the parts of our claim. That's all it is. We just stay within the boundaries of that claim. We don't need to go off on tangents. We don't need to retell the text. We just break down into our little sort of minor parts of the claim and make sure that we've proven all of those, and then we're just about done. So the first sort of mini claim that we have within this secondary claim is that Jocko is an isolated, depressed character. So that's the first thing we're going to have to set about proving. Another little mini claim that we have in here is that he ends up being a leader within the town. So that's another thing that we're going to have to prove. The third little mini claim that we have here is that feeling cared for provides the stimulus for personal growth. So what we now notice is that within this bigger claim, we have a few minor claims. And as a side note, this is why we make sure that our secondary claims are rich and complex, because if they're not, and if we don't have these little mini claims within it, then it's going to be hard for us to get sort of the richness and depth in our paragraphs that we need. We're not going to be able to write a lot about them. So let's look at the first sort of mini claim we make and how we set about proving it. So our mini claim is that Jocko was initially isolated and depressed. So we said Jocko's initial depression and isolation within the town of Dampier is evident in his revelations that he doesn't have a home and that he hasn't laughed in years. So we have this claim and we've used some chocolate chips to back that up. Notice that we've used square brackets to change the quote where we need, and that our quotations are really smoothly embedded as well. Depressed after the loss of his family, Jocko implies that he feels no sense of connection to the town when he shares that he is there only for the money. So again, we're proving that he's isolated and depressed. So isolated, he doesn't create any connections with any other characters. In this way, he alienates, again, we're using words from our Quizlet, he alienates himself and gains a reputation as someone who never even chuckles. So again, we're proving this idea that he's depressed and isolated. Stenders emphasises Jocko's isolation and depression through the scene in which. Now, what you'll notice about this sentence stem, I am going to keep reading in a second, but I have used the name of the director to start with. I've used a bridging word, so I've said he emphasises it through. And now I'm actually going to use some really specific evidence that focuses on what we call cinematic techniques. So how the director conveys meaning through all those little extra things that we did. And these are things that you touched on when you did your character profiles. So how does he use lighting and music and camera angles to communicate something to the viewer? Stenders emphasises Jocko's isolation and depression through the scene in which we see Jocko seated alone at the local bar on the morning that he chooses to take his own life. So I've only sort of retold enough of the plot there so that my reader knows which part of the film I'm talking about. Shadowy lighting and mournful music highlight the depth of Jocko's loneliness. And as he departs from the bar, a lingering close-up shot of a photo of his wife and child, who he feels he killed, conveys that whilst Jocko felt a sense of family and belonging at an earlier point in his life, his connectedness is not to the town of Dampier. So I've highlighted there for you those chocolate chips. As you can see, it's quite a delicious chocolate chip biscuit we've made here, this mini proving of this mini claim. The other thing, again, that I'm highlighting is the use of these bridging words. So if you have another look at these transition words, these bridging words, you can pause the video here if you want or go back to the resources on STL link. You'll see that we're using words that create a bridge between the evidence and our ideas. So we've said this implies, the lighting highlights, Stenders emphasises, this conveys. We're using bridging words to show connections between the evidence and our ideas. So that's our first part that we proved, our first little mini claim. The second little mini claim, now I've skipped on past this position of leadership, because I'm going to come back to that. I've made a choice in the way I structure my paragraph. And the next little mini claim that I'm going to prove is this, that feeling cared for provides the stimulus for personal growth. Now, I've used a linking word. So again, if I go back to the previous slide, I've used a transition word. And this is a transition word that draws attention to the fact that I'm talking about he was depressed, but he becomes happy. So I've used this word conversely, on the other hand. At the point at which Red Dog saves Jocko's life, another chocolate chip, as he floats in the bay, Stenders employs the use of a point of view shot of the mining community rallied on the shore. So again, I'm using really specific evidence, cinematic techniques. The bright, warm colours of the miners' costumes in the beach scene in stark contrast to the sombre colours of the prior scene. This moment is the critical turning point for Jocko, at which he realises that he is cared for by the people around him. So again, I'm saying that feeling cared for provides the stimulus for personal growth. Then I'm moving on to, so I've used a little phrase that then connects the stimulus to personal growth with the leadership. It is as a consequence of this newfound sense of inclusion, demonstrated particularly by his close friendship with Peter, John and Bano, that Jocko develops into a leader of the community. So this is where I'm proving this mini part about a position of leadership in the town. This is evident in the fact that it is Jocko who, in the culminating, so that's just a fancy word for the final, the kind of climactic scenes of the film, persuades the community to finally take charge of itself and erect a meaningful statue that represents the Pilbara in the community centre, in the community members. So now I'm returning to my mini sentence and I'm to my secondary claim, and I'm checking again, have I proven each of those mini claims? So I've proven that he was an isolated, depressed character. I've proven that he occupies a position of leadership at the end of the film, and I've proven that feeling cared for provides the stimulus for personal growth. So the only thing I have left to do now, if you remember from the at the start of the video when I went through the essential components of our body paragraph, is a linking sentence. Again, I've highlighted there to draw attention to the fact that I have used a transition word, because we know that that makes our writing really smooth and cohesive. Ultimately, despite his harrowing past, it is through his slow development of connections to the townspeople of Dampier that Jocko is able to overcome his depression, taking his place at the forefront of the community as a leader within it. Now, do be careful with your linking sentences, because although if we read back to our secondary claim, our opening sentence, the transformation of Jocko from an isolated, depressed character to one who occupies a position of leadership in the town demonstrates that feeling cared for provides the stimulus for personal growth. Whew, long sentence. Even though these two sentences, our claim and our linking sentence, are similar, they are slightly different. And the linking sentence is different because it draws together the threads of what we've been talking about in the rest of the paragraph. It has a little bit more detail, it has a little bit more sort of reference to what we've spoken about in the middle, in the meaty part of our body paragraph. But it still echoes the opening sentence. So it still kind of retains the essence of it, but it's certainly not just exactly the same words with a transition word there. So if you find yourself just using exactly the same word and phrase, but with a transition word, or maybe just changing around the sentence structure a little bit, try and include some sort of reference to what it is that you actually analysed and discussed in the centre of your body paragraph. So there you have it. That is how you write a body paragraph in an analytical essay that responds to the film Red Dog by Kriv Stenders. Good luck.